Now let's take a look at some of the effects that were added inside of Camera Raw 6 or Photoshop CS5. You can get to them when you're in Camera Raw under the little effects panel. It's the one that says FX on it. And when you come over here, you'll see that we have some new options for post crop. We also have something called green. So let's take a look at post crop first. So because vignetting, you drag it over to the left, it darkens the edges. You drag it over to the right, it brightens the edges. Post crop vignetting is not new. That was added back inside of Photoshop CS4. But what we do have now are some different options for our post crop, because back in CS4, what we had basically was paint overlay, and all that was is it just essentially added black to the edges. It just darkened it. It was like putting black over it and then just reducing the opacity or keeping it really high, whatever you're looking for. But it just kind of looked blah. It just makes everything look gray and blah. All right, so that's what paint overlay basically is it's what we had inside of Photoshop CS4. However, what we have now is highlight priority and color priority. So highlight priority, and in fact, before we do this, let's go ahead and make some changes to the photo. I'm going to come in here, increase my blacks a little bit, add just a touch of fill light here, some clarity, some vibrance, and maybe even warm it just a little bit more here. Okay, so let's see here. That's before, that's after. All right, now I'm liking it. Now we can come over to effects. Let's go and zoom in on the top corner portion because I want you to be able to see the colors and things like that, what's happening. Highlight priority pays more attention to the highlights. So it's not going to drastically darken the highlights while it will darken the areas, but it's going to look for some bright areas and try to maintain them. What you're going to see, and this is my favorite option because it darkens, but it also kind of burns in and it just gives a really nice effect. Okay, and that's opposed to color priority, which pays more attention to the colors. So it's not going to try to mess with the colors, because when I say burn in, you're going to see, let's take a look at our before. That's before, that's after. When I switch to color, you'll see the difference here. Okay, that's what color does. Let's go back to highlight. You see the golden colors over here, they're burned in a little bit more. The blues are kind of just, the best word I can say is burned, okay? It's not necessarily blackened, it's just burned, where color priority says, well, I'm going to look at the colors. I'm going to try to maintain the colors as much as I can, even though that I have to darken this to make it a vignette. I'm still going to try to maintain that the colors are there and not really change the colors. Okay, so it still has a darkening effect. You really can't even tell, but when I turn it off, it's definitely there. When I turn it back on, you can see it. Okay, but it's just a different effect. So you've got highlight priority, which is my favorite, which really burns in the edges and to me gives a very nice style of a vignette. You've got color priority. If you happen to be looking at the edges and you don't like what highlight priority is doing to the colors on those edges, then just switch it over here to color. Honestly, I can't think of a time where you'd use paint overlay. For me, that setting is basically gone. It's basically dead. Okay, so that takes care of our vignetting settings. Let's talk a little bit about green. And really, I'm not going to be adding too much green to a color photo most of the time. I see this added to a black and white. It just kind of has more of a nostalgic effect to it. But we'll come in here, convert this over to grayscale, come back over to our effects panel here. And essentially green is just that. We'll zoom in so you can really see it here. But it's just adding green. It's adding noise type stuff to your photo here. All right, so that's before. Don't you love it when somebody says stuff? But I think you get the idea of what green is adding here. The other options here are size. Well, pretty self-explanatory. Take it all the way down. You're going to get very, very tiny little speckles of green. And as you increase it, you get larger pieces of green. Okay, what's the sweet spot setting for this one? I personally don't like the really low setting, and I definitely don't like a really high setting. So my sweet spot is going to be somewhere in the 20s, 25, 30 or so. And then roughness. Roughness is almost kind of like a blur. When I bring it all the way over to the left, I get a very coarse, kind of artifacty, edgy type of a grain to it. And as I start to bring it over here to the right, I get a very, what I call just what looks to me like a blurry green. Okay, it's almost like it's spreading the little blotches out more instead of having those little specks of grain just be tiny little specks. Again, the sweet spot here is going to be somewhere around 35 to 40 for me. I don't like it too low. I definitely don't like it too high. All right, so it's a panel that we have here inside of Photoshop CS5 and the new version of Camera Raw. Effects, post-crop vignetting, not necessarily new, but we do have some new styles of vignette that we can add to it. And then the grain effect, again, that's really just there as an effect. It's not something you're going to use on every single photo unless you like to add grain to every single photo. But if you are looking for some type of a special effect, that's where you can go add it.